When we think about coastal mass tourism, the first image coming to our mind is often made of half-naked people in their swimsuits, crammed along the water's edge and bathing in the sea, backed by a large stretch of multicolored beach umbrellas. People and umbrellas can be so thick that you can no longer see the sand beneath them. And now, let's try to imagine something different. We are still on a crowded beach, but there are no umbrellas, and the first thing that jumps to our eyes is that people are fully dressed, like they were taking a walk in the city center. Men with long trousers and shirts, women with gowns reaching their ankles. They are not lying in the sand, they are rather walking around or standing in a circle to listen to an open air gig, or just sitting on the sand in small groups. The bravest among them have lifted the hem of their trousers and gowns and are shyly plunging their feet and ankles in the sea water. There are no colored beach umbrellas in sight. If we leave the beach and take a walk around, we will see people taking strolls on the northern and southern piers. On the background, the tower guards the town and looks towards the open sea. We are in Blackpool, in England, at the turn of the 20th century. Or, in other words, we are where it all began. In the second half of the 19th century, Blackpool became the first mass tourism centre in England, after the railway reached the town. In the same period, in fact, employees working in several factories began to have a week off during summer months, Wakes Week, which they started to spend in Blackpool and, later on, in other coastal locations in England. Mass tourism had started, but it did not really take off until the 20s and 30s in the United States, also due to political instability occurring in Europe in the first half of the 20th century. In those decades, the concept of American outdoor emerged, together with cheap accommodation facilities, motels and camping sites. This was also made possible by the shift from train to cars as the main way of traveling around. This is the so-called phase of spontaneous mass tourism. Accommodation, food and beverages were offered by small entrepreneurs that responded to the growing demand for these services. Europe had to wait until the 50s to see the rise of spontaneous mass tourism, and it took a peculiar form. The sun and the sea became the symbol of the conquer of the right to free time and health for the working classes, as well as of liberation from the constraints of city life. Thousands of small, family-owned, all-inclusive hotels appeared along the Mediterranean coasts, and in particular in France and Italy, offering a basic but cozy service. Mass tourism destinations started to emerge. The golden age of coastal mass tourism in the Mediterranean arrived in the 60s and 70s, hand in hand with the European economic boom. During these decades, tourism entered a new phase. Small hotels gave way to large hotels and hotel international chains, mainly directed to the working class. This brought to the massive urbanization of portion of the Mediterranean coast, in correspondence of the emerging mass destinations, such as, for example, the Riviera Romagnola in Italy, the Côte d'Azur in France, and the Costa Blanca in Spain. In most cases, this growth was extremely rapid and uncontrolled. Benidorm in Costa Blanca is often taken as an extreme example of wild coastal development and its negative effects, and we can see it in this picture. Mass tourism destinations started to decline in the 80s and 90s due to the emergence of a new mentality. Holidays started to be seen as a way of going beyond the usual daily experience and as a chance to widen one's horizons. The spread of do-it-yourself holidays through internet also contributed to the decline. But these factors alone, although important, are not enough to explain the decline of mass tourism destinations. Originally, tourists were attracted to coastal destinations by the sea, the sun and the beautiful landscape. but coastal mass development ended up destroying the very landscape and environment which attracted tourists in the first place. Overall, the current 3S mass tourism model is increasingly problematic and unsustainable. Environmental and social impacts, including landscape degradation, are not only threatening the attractiveness of tourist destination, but the overall economic sustainability of the sector. The long-term costs associated with high congestion and coastal development patterns outweigh the short-term gains represented by the number of visits. In addition, although the number of visits is increasing, average expenditure per night and average number of days spent in the destination are decreasing, revealing the ongoing decline of the 3S model. From this perspective, it could be said that tourism is eating up itself. Coastal tourism develops at the interface between land and sea. By altering the coast, it does not only degrade coastal landscape, but it also alters the marine ecosystems and processes. In turn, these alterations have often impacts on the coast and on tourism activities in a vicious circle. Similarly, unsustainable development decisions on the coast have an impact on the ocean, and the effects of these strategies can further influence decisions. At the same time, a perception shift is ongoing on the tourist side. In 2015, around half of the respondents to an EU survey on tourism declared that the natural features of a destination, such as, for example, landscape and weather, were seen as the main reasons for wanting to return to the same place for a holiday. This suggests that healthy coastal and marine environments are seen as important touristic assets, and that tourists are increasingly concerned by sustainability aspects. However, tourism can be either a disruptive or a constructive factor, depending on how it is managed and organized. When tourism management focuses on the enhancement and restoration of coastal and marine environments, it delivers a double positive outcome. The environmental impacts of mass tourism are mitigated, and the touristic areas keep the natural and cultural values which attract tourists. Tourism can then become an agent to improve territorial and environmental quality by promoting an innovative territorial approach. The ongoing decline of the traditional 3S tourism model represents, in fact, an opportunity for blue growth, as it highlights the need for innovative business models promoting a sustainable, high-quality offer. The coastal tourism industry has been based so far on the 3S, sound, sea and sand, and it has been built on standardized services and decreasing costs of accommodation. Since decades, coastal regions have the highest level of tourism intensity and density as compared to other areas. Urbanization came along the rapid growth of the tourism industry. Tourists needed beach resorts, hotels and other types of accommodation, car parks, golf courses and coastal roads, both to reach the locations and to enjoy the scenic landscape. In addition, thanks to the tourism industry, but also other important economic activities linked to the sea, like for example shipping or other industries, the Mediterranean coasts are densely populated and host several major urban centers, as we can see in the picture. Among the different pressures exerted by coastal development on the environment, coastal erosion is a very good example of the vicious circle illustrated in slide 7, and it is a widespread phenomenon in the Mediterranean. Coastal erosion is a natural phenomenon, but human activities linked to coastal development increase erosion rates and alter the coastline dynamics, so that erosion might occur in stretches of beaches previously untouched by this issue. Several activities concur to increase the erosion, such as, for example, sand mining activities for construction purposes, mechanical cleaning of beaches, and destruction of dune system to make room for beach resorts. Coastal development causes a high rate of soil sealing, which results in a large amount of water reaching the urban drainage system, which is then discharged into the sea. The construction of marinas and recreational ports also have a strong influence on the acceleration of erosion phenomena, as it implies digging activities and the artificialization of the seabed. Colimbari Beach in northern Crete is a good example of the effects of marina construction on the surrounding beach and coastline. Here, the port was built in 2002, leading to blockage of sediment transport and eventually to a substantial retreat of the shoreline. Responses to erosion commonly include erosion barriers and artificial nourishment of beaches. Nevertheless, these interventions are not addressing the structural causes of the problem, but are simply trying to contrast it. In Italy, for example, the state finances with one hand marinas and other structural interventions along the coast, thus contributing to erosion. Whereas, with the other hand, it spends millions of euros for artificial nourishment of beaches, often made with waste materials not suitable for the scope, and protective barriers as well. In some regions, the business of artificial nourishment is draining the resources of local administration as a sort of perennial mortgage financed by public funds. In contrast, restoring dune systems, which form a natural barrier against erosion, would offer a long-term solution. In most cases, refurbishment interventions are demanded by resort managers themselves as a way to contrast erosion, which is constantly reducing the beach surface available for resort activities. In this way, a private business, often contributing to erosion, is sustained with public financial resources. At the same time, where tourism management focuses on at the same time, tourism can be a positive push to another approach to erosion phenomena. Massive coastal urbanization is the result of complex social, economic, and policy dynamics, consequently involving several economic activities and actors. As a result, tourism is a particularly complex and fragmented sector, often lacking synergies among different stakeholders, as well as an overall governance system able to bring together all actors and components. In contrast, an innovative and sustainable tourism model could only be established through comprehensive strategic tourism development planning, taking into account the carrying capacity of the local systems and allowing for benefit sharing among all stakeholders. In turn, this would call for an overall governance system based on the cooperation and the informed participation of all stakeholders, supported by a strong political leadership. Social, economic, and policy dynamics may differ from one location to the other. In the Riviera Romagnola, for example, the urban structure that we see today is the result of a spontaneous urban development occurred with no reference models. The Riviera responded to the pressure posed by a growing touristic demand with a large variety of uncoordinated urban plans specific to each municipalities. These plans had the common objective, though, to promote the private initiative of operators with scarce financial resources but a strong willingness to engage in the touristic sector. In other words, tourists wanted to go to the Riviera, and local inhabitants responded, turning themselves into touristic operators without a real overall management of touristic development. In Spain, and Benidorm is a particular example of this, the coastal tourism industry started to boom in the 50s, 60s. In this period, Owning properties and hotel facilities in coastal areas became synonym of controlling commercial activities. Thus, the management and optimization of existing facilities and processes progressively adopted an industrial approach in a limited and constrained space, such as coastal areas. Urban planning and regulations had some issues limiting their application, and in any case they were seen as a brake to touristic development and thus systematically ignored or bypassed. In addition, fiscal policies provided incentives to private initiative in real estate investment, regardless of the location of such investment. These two examples highlight one of the major governance and regulatory gaps which influenced tourism outcomes so far. Planning strategies have in fact been developed in mass destinations, but these were often fragmented, uncoordinated, and most importantly, based on financial criteria and profit maximization. In addition, these examples show that urban planning, regulation, and economic policies have, of course, a key role in determining territorial processes and tourism outcomes. But they are not the only players. It is the way in which policies and planning interact with economic and social actors that determines the outcomes of urbanization. And key actors might differ from one country to the other, even from one region to the other. Thus, mapping the activities and the related actors concurring and involved in coastal urbanization becomes crucial to gain an insight in the process. Activities linked to tourism, which play a role in coastal urbanization, can occur both in the urban environment and on beaches. The location can be important in terms of the impacts of construction, as concrete facilities in beaches and on dune systems can be particularly destructive for the coastal and marine environments. In town, the main activities are accommodation, supermarkets, food and beverage, like restaurants and bars, and leisure activities. The latter two activities are also carried out on beaches, generally in the form of beach resorts or in marinas as well. Construction of new buildings obviously concerns all four activities. These activities are all supported by basic services such as waste collection and disposal, energy provision, water supply and wastewater collection and treatment. In addition, each activity is supported by specific supply chains, as for example, supply of construction materials, supply to supermarkets, etc. These supply chains might contribute to coastal urbanization or not, depending on where suppliers are located. For this reason, they are worth mentioning, but we are not taking them into account in the responsible analysis. Public authorities can intervene in the management of these activities and support services at different levels, through national legislation, through regional and local planning and regulation, and also through touristic promotion agencies. In the Riviera Romagnola, for example, the Touristic Promotion Agency is made up of public authorities and local economic operators, and its aim is to promote tourism in the area. This also means that legislation and planning can have an influence on urbanization as well as on the sustainability of the touristic sectors by action and measures targeting each of these activities. In turn, sustainable urban planning and tourism management can be best achieved by considering these activities all at once. To contribute to the blue growth of the tourism sector, ocean literacy will need to intervene in the vicious circle which is currently affecting coastal and marine environments on the one hand and tourism activities on the other. To do this, one of the key goals of ocean literacy will be to improve coordination among the different actors and overcome current sector fragmentation. as key actors can differ from one location to the other. Local governance systems managing tourism development, environmental management, and coastal development in the target area must be clearly identified, as well as key economic and civil society actors who have the largest influence on coastal development processes, for example, through lobbying power. At the same time, ocean literacy campaigns will also need to target tourists to raise their awareness on the impact of mass tourism and on how they can mitigate their own impact. On the other hand, it can inform local actors on tourist feedback on the environmental quality of a destination and learn about their expectations and wishes for a healthier environment, thus creating a virtuous circle where a vicious circle was. Thanks a lot for the attention. As usual, if you have questions, you can write a comment either on the course page on Emma or on the responsible Facebook group. Thank you.